Please subscribe and don't forget to press the bell icon to get notified whenever we upload a new video.
Well, the good news is Japan has hit a quarter-century high, at least in the yesterday session. I guess the bad news is you can't hit a quarter-century high without some people wondering, are there fundamentals about it, behind it? How did we get to this level? Do we have full participation in terms of domestic investors and overseas investors? The answer for right now is really not, because we've got much more foreign capital coming in than domestic participation. That's exactly why we're seeing a 118-point pullback on the Nikkei 225 after they hit a landmark yesterday and ended yesterday trading Tuesday at the highest we've seen since January of 1992. Rest of the market seemed to be in sympathy today. The topic is down, cost is down, and the ASX is down a relatively muted 22 basis points or 0.25%. Now, following that rally yesterday, let's look at some of the big export names out of Japan and see how they are faring today. Let's take up the case of Advantis, down 1.25% or thereabouts, which is the loss leader among those four. Toyota is in the headlines, the automaker raising its full-year operating core earnings forecast based on an assumption the yen will be at or around 111 to the U.S. dollar. It's actually on the weak side of that, which is going to help them a couple yen more. And for the second quarter, operating profits at TM, Toyota Motor, was up 10%, and that topped expectations. They also announced a share buyback worth $250 billion yen. Okay, let's get to the rest of the market action. We've got Matt ready to rock and roll in Sydney. Let's head to June and pick up on Seoul again, which has got all the attention because Trump continues today with a speech in front of the National Assembly. I'm looking for some sparks there, June. This will be fun.
Yes, maybe some sparks there, but the market's opening pretty weak this morning, especially for the blue chips. The Kospi down about 1/3%, a Kosdaq higher by just about 0.1% today. Let's start with a look at the shipbuilders today on the Kospi. We're looking at this sector underperforming the broader markets. Samsung Heavy Industries down more than 1% at the open after reporting their third quarter numbers after market close yesterday, missing expectations. Third quarter net profit down 82%, operating profit down 72%, sales down 37% year-on-year. This is, of course, coming from the industry-wide weakness that we are seeing for the shipbuilders, a decline in sales. So not just less orders, but the few ships that they did sell were lower price, lower margin ships. So we did see Samsung Heavy Industries take a hit in the third quarter. Operating income loss that came from the shutting down of some shipping docks also meant some weakness there. But if we do go into the breakdown of its finances, there is some sunlight here, some positivity coming from the self-rescue plans that they're currently going through with. Its debt levels now at 3.7 trillion won as of the end of September, which is a big improvement from the 5.3 trillion won debt that they recorded during the same time last year. So you're looking at Samsung Heavy down about 1/3%. KEPCO actually up just about 1/3% after it also missed market expectations after market yesterday. That was a check on the Korean markets at the open. Matt, over to you.
June, thanks very much. The Australian market is weaker an hour into the trading session, down by about 10 points. But we're managing to hold on to that 6,000 level, that elusive 6,000 level that we managed to breach yesterday for the first time since 2008. So the Australian market continuing to trade at around the best levels in almost a decade. We would be doing a lot more poorly if it's not for a 1.5% jump in CBA shares today. The stock's higher after the bank revealed a 6% rise in its Q1 cash profit to 2.65 billion. The country's biggest bank says a repricing of its mortgages and assets drove the numbers higher and pushed up the group's net interest margin. It also said that it saw quarterly loan impairment expenses down by 20% over the quarterly period as well. Take a look at how the rest of the banks are doing. A mostly positive session with the exception of Westpac, which is just trading flat at this moment in time. BT Investment is another one we're watching today. Profit numbers out from that investment manager. Full year profit was up by 3.8% to 147.5 million. It will pay out a final dividend of 26 cents a share, and the stock's higher by around about 0.6%. Some deal news to tell you about today. James Hardie buying Fermacell. This is Europe's leading producer of fibre gypsum boards. Those boards, of course, that you use in housing construction for 473 million. It says it will be accretive accretive in the second full fiscal year. And New Farm shares suspended from trade today, the company requesting a trading halt in connection to a proposed acquisition. No word on that one as yet, but we'll bring you the details as soon as they're released to the market. Bernie, back to you.
Can't wait. Give us a shout the moment it arrives, okay? As market disseminated news there, Matt. Like parent, like child, you might say. China Literature proving it may be a star just like its parent, Tencent Holdings' IPO getting a whole lot of investor interest. Emily, I got to say, the stars are aligning. This is if you're going to do an IPO, this is the week to do it. I mean, we're at highs we haven't seen since January of 2007 in the local market. I mean, man, you couldn't time this more to perfection.
Yeah. And so we're watching, of course, the big debut today of China Literature. This is the biggest online reader publishing company over in China with something like a 43% market share. The company raised $1.1 billion after pricing shares at the top of the range, $55 per piece. So the $1.1 billion that is before the green shoe, which is expected to be exercised after the market opens. But we're looking at no cornerstone investors, but they didn't worry because the retail portion was something like 625 times oversubscribed. They locked up so much money that it's caused a spike in HIBOR. It was $66.6 billion locked up in funds, people diving into this stock. And that was basically 625 times oversubscribed, 1/3 of Hong Kong's money supply. So very, very impressive. As far as the international portion was concerned, we have China Literature saying that part was very significantly oversubscribed. We're going to be watching shares of Tencent as well. This is the company's parent, which owns 62%, already trading at all-time record highs. Tencent shares yesterday spiking 3%, $391 per piece. So keep an eye out on China Literature. It'll be coming to market at 9:30 a.m. Hong Kong, trading under the ticker symbol 772.HK. 772,
okay. It's got a 7 in front. Easy to remember. Keep it all in the family, right? All right, looking forward to that. Especially new environment down at the exchange, Emily, without the actual trading floor, but they still have the gongs there.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what it actually, because the construction or the renovations have started, but the gong, of course, is still there. So we'll check out the new and improved Hong Kong exchange.
Yeah, they have an extra 30,000 square feet. Maybe they get 30,000 diameter inch gongs or something like that, just to show how big the market is. Just under 2 hours away from Trump's big speech to the National Assembly in South Korea. And then it's back on Big Bird to head to China. We've got our correspondents on the ground, Sherry in Seoul and Eunice in Beijing. Let's kick it off with Sherry. Sherry, I thought that President Trump was going to give a pass to the DMZ because it was too cliche, because too many presidents have gone there and brought binoculars. But our folks at our team at our NBC says actually Marine One was intending to go near it, and they were a few minutes away, but bad weather turned them back. I mean, nothing like a little fog and rain to keep the commander away from the 38th parallel.
Exactly. It's a bit foggy, I have to admit, here in Seoul this morning. And we did actually see a chopper that is believed to be a Marine One helicopter going back and forth both ways, flying over the National Assembly in the 7 hours. So I think that's what was carrying President Trump trying to go to DMZ. Yes, he did say it was a bit of a cliche, and he did talk about how his other officials, including Tillerson, Pence, and Mattis, just last week, in fact, did go there. So he had to make a choice between Camp Humphreys, that he did manage to go yesterday, and DMZ. But I think he found some downtime this morning, so he did try to go there, but the weather conditions did not cooperate, according to these flashes coming from the White House just moments ago as well. I think overall, yes, he was very much interested in going to DMZ. I mean, to make that second attempt to waiting in Seoul for the weather conditions to clear up too. Yes, and apart from that, we're hearing that he is in his limo working on that speech, the key speech that he will be making here in Seoul, in South Korea's National Assembly, in the building that you see behind me. And as you can see or hear, the protesters are making their way, have just arrived, and they're actually playing this song once again. And we've got hundreds of police officers surrounding our camera crew, as well as the National Assembly building. In terms of the content of the National Assembly address, Obviously, North Korea is very much expected to be high on his mind and his item. And just because he toned down his rhetoric, I don't think that he's going to not mention the need for Chinese and Russian involvement in all this, and also calling on the international community to maximize pressure on the North Korean regime. Bernie?
Okay. I'm sure you and I are just two people that are a little bit surprised at the way the president's toned down the rhetoric. I mean, how do you go from fire and fury to total annihilation, total destruction to, I think it'll all work out in the end. It always works out in the end. We've got all these aircraft carriers and the support vessels, but I hope to God that we don't need to use it. We need to talk. What's this sudden urge for dialogue? It's very strange. It's almost like President Moon Jae-in got inside his head or something, Sherry.
Exactly. I'm dying to find out what actually happened in that summit meeting room with the South Korean President Moon Jae-in yesterday. So this toned down rhetoric, he didn't really mention North Korea to begin with. He quickly mentioned that in his part of the joint press conference. But when he was asked that question, he was talking about, yes, potentially making a deal with North Korea as well. He was more focused on the business side of things, trade with South Korea, making that a free trade agreement more fair and free. And he was actually highlighting more about creating jobs in the U.S. and reducing the trade deficit burden on the United States, thanks to that billions of dollars worth of military equipment purchase deal that he says that he got from South Korea. Bernie?
Okay, looking, this is going to be great here. An hour and a half to go, and we'll see what words the president chooses this time. Sherry, we're gonna. I can feel the tension building there at the National Assembly. See you in no time at all. Despite the often fiery rhetoric between China and the U.S., the president is likely to get a very warm reception when he heads to Beijing today. Eunice, I have no idea what a State Visit Plus is, but it sounds like a fattened up version of a Christmas goose of a state visit. And you know what? Just in time for the occasion, the folks at Twitter just announced overnight that they're going from finally 140 to 280 characters. So, Jinping and Ke-chung, all they need to do is just keep Trump occupied, tweeting out wins, contract wins, and you won't have any time to pick up any contentious issues. This is just wonderful.
That's right. That's great. And actually the White House press secretary said that he will continue to tweet throughout his trip. And Bernie, there is one way that he would be able to tweet, and that is if his phone already has international roaming and a really good plan. So then it could jump over the firewall. So he could continue to tweet the entire time while he's here. But as you had said, the Chinese have been rolling out the red carpet, a very warm reception. The way that the Foreign Ministry described this, as well as other officials, is that it's a State Visit Plus. So he's supposed to be getting all the same lavish dinners, the banquets, the one-on-one meeting with President Xi of a state visit. But then in addition to that, they're going to be adding some personal touches. So they said that there will be a lot of cozy and casual discussions and events for the two to get to know each other better. And even today in the state press, they've been talking about how he's not only going to have a tour of the Forbidden City, but that the president is going to be hosted by the Chinese president for dinner at the Forbidden City, which would be a first for any American president. So part of that, the belief is that the Chinese do want to make sure that they roll out the red carpet, that they flatter him, that they have him in good standing, that the two continue to build on that relationship, especially when they go into the discussions about North Korea and trade. And Bernie, as we were talking about just a half an hour ago, the focus of the trade discussions is likely going to be on reducing the trade deficit. A lot of people here expect that there are going to be deliverables, and that Goldman Sachs is going to be partnering and announcing a partnership with CIC, the Chinese Sovereign Wealth Fund, for a $5 billion investment fund that would be focusing on investing in U.S. manufacturing, Bernie.
I think this is all noise, to be honest with you, Eunice. As long as you've got you give him access to Twitter, and I understand he's got a day plan which caps the daily rate of $25 and all the data he can consume. Bracing itself for a potential opposition protest today, we mark the one-year anniversary of the demonetization drive. Can you believe it? It's been a year in what's being called Black Day, the protest aimed at the government's latest GST changes. The move last year by the Narendra Modi government to outlaw close to 90% of cash, particularly big notes, in circulation was controversial. It was aimed at tackling corruption and money laundering, but it had a dampening effect on transactions. It is still very much a cash-based economy. Former RBI chief Raghuram Rajan took a positive view on reforms in an interview with CNBC.
The goods and services tax, in my view, is long-run positive. And there were always going to be glitches in implementing it. But going forward, these three, fixing the debt, the impact of demonetization waning, and the goods and services tax, fixing that and figuring out how to work it in a low-cost environment, will be growth positive for India.
The Sensex index closed south on this Tuesday session, but the index did hit a record high on Monday. All right, let us check the global market rally. Quite a thing, quite a feat to talk about, fueled along with the Wall Street record run we've been seeing. The Nikkei, I've talked about this, at a more than quarter-century high. We haven't seen these levels since early 1992. It's pulling back a little bit today, but hey, when you're at a quarter-century high, what the hey? Christopher Brankin is CEO at TD Ameritrade Asia and joins us from Singapore this morning. Christopher, welcome to the program. What are you folks at TD Ameritrade seeing? Because what I've been seeing, Chris, is that domestic participation is still tentative in a place like Japan, but man, the foreign money has been pouring in. We saw one and a half month period where $40 billion net in capital inflows went into Japan. That tells me that the world has a rosier view than Japanese do.
Look, absolutely. You see our customers at TD Ameritrade have been optimistic for all of 2017, realistically. For the last 9 months, they've been net new buyers, adding exposure across many different market classes. Now, we also see with Japan being, kind of the currency weakening to like an 8-month low, right around that 114 level. We've seen this as a positive to the Japanese economy. So we've seen a lot of interest around, what's going on in terms of Japan with the U.S., and we've seen this as nothing but positive, and our customers at TD Ameritrade have been reacting as such. We do see a lot of interest around outside of China, also with the Chinese stocks recently, in terms of, we see things like Tencent, JD.com, and Alibaba. Big thing coming up here this week. 11/11 Singles Day, where it's the largest e-commerce day of the year. So we look for that trend to continue in terms of some of these Chinese e-commerce stocks as well.
Yeah, is that and I want to point out something too, because we talk about the Nikkei, we talk about the Hang Seng, we talk about the Shanghai Composite, but those are indices. Those were compiled a long time ago. Those may or may not be representative of what's really in vogue in fashion right now. You have something called the IMX. That's your own internal barometer, your investor movement index, which kind of relates what TD Ameritrade clients are doing, and they've been net buyers of 9 consecutive months in these parts. So this isn't a sudden phenomenon. This is like an all-year thing, right? 2017,
correct.
They've been just raring to go. Mm-hmm.
Correct. And in fact, last month, our report came out yesterday here in Asia, was the second highest, optimistic month our customers have ever had since we've compiled this survey in the last 8 years. Now, this tracks our over 7 million customers in the U.S. and in Asia, so our customers have been optimistic. Now, we do see some, like I said earlier, with some of the Chinese kind of e-commerce stock with the Alibabas and Tencent and JD.com. Now, what we have seen, we've seen huge rallies in oil here recently. We've seen oil up over 25% since the late August pullbacks around the U.S. storms. So we have seen some selling on some of the large oil giants like ExxonMobil and Chevron, and some profit taking. We also have seen, after a positive earnings report from Goldman Sachs, we did see some selling there, and we did see some selling around Wells Fargo, which we have seen over the last 4 months.
Chris, is this, I guess the big question is, does this optimism in Asia and I guess emerging markets, is this going to be coming at the expense of the North American markets? Are people starting to see parallels between, 1999 as we transition to, Y2K, 2000 and the dot-com boom and bust and 2007? Are they starting to see the parallels? Are they starting to see the signposts?
I think it's different, because I think a lot of it is driven around, where we're going in terms of some of these things that President Trump and his administration is trying to get pushed through Congress in the U.S. I think the next level up, what we're seeing a lot of interest in terms of our customers, is around what's going on with the tax reform bill and what's going on with the Fed. Now, if we can see tax reform and Fed kind of raise interest rates here again one more time at the end of the year, this is going to be positive in terms of what's going on with the giant U.S. banks. So I think that's where we're looking for maybe our next leg up, is around the financial sector in the U.S. But I don't see that parallel, back to the 99. Like, we do see some, market flows going into Asia because there's a lot of positive signs around the economies there. But we don't see that at the expense of North America at this point.
That's very good. Good to hear, and very soothing words indeed, Chris. Thank you for your time today. We'll catch up again real soon. Chris Brink.
All right, Bernie. Thanks for having me on.
Asia. Thanks for being on.